Feeling the Halloween spirit and ready to craft your own spooky yet playful jewelry? Or maybe you're a Beetlejuice fan who loves unique pieces. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pair of whimsical earrings with a fun spinning twist. Inspired by the talented works of Judy Belcher, these earrings are perfect for any fan of the ghost with the most. You won't want to miss it, so let's get started. Once your clay is conditioned, go ahead and cut out a 4-inch square sheet from each color. I'm actually using a stencil I made to make this step a little easier. It also helps me get a better visual, so I can be sure I've got just the right amount of clay for the process. Now stack them neatly on top of each other. To make sure everything is smooth and there are no air pockets trapped in between, grab your acrylic rod and gently roll across the surface. After that, run the layered stack back through the pasta machine, still on the thickest setting, to thin out those stripes a bit. I've found that cutting the edges nice and straight really helps when it comes to the next steps. It makes the layering and cutting process so much easier to measure. Plus, it cuts down on wasted clay. Now, carefully cut your stack in half and then relayer the pieces on top of one another. Make sure you're keeping that alternating color pattern intact. You're going to keep repeating this process until you've built up a total of 8 layers, which will give you 16 beautiful stripes. Now we've got 8 stripes, so let's go ahead and cut it one last time. And there you have it, 16 bold, gorgeously vibrant black and white stripes. Now I'm going to clean up the edges of our striped cane. While stacking, I noticed the glitter in the black clay scratched the white a bit. So to keep everything looking sharp, I'm going to make sure that when I slice, I'm cutting against all the layers of the cane and not just one color. Our striped cane is all ready for the next part of the project. Now let's cut about a 2 mm slice from the striped cane and pass it through the pasta machine on a number 4 setting. I'm using a Lisa Pavelka texture mat in the Ancient Doodles pattern for this part. To prevent sticking, give the mat a light spray of Armor All and dab off any excess. Then gently place your wasabi clay onto the texture and press it in with your fingers. A little spritz of water will help keep your fingers from sticking to the clay. Doesn't this texture look so fun and whimsical? Next, grab your 3/4 inch coffin cutter. Make sure to dip it in Armor All first and use it to cut out shapes from the textured clay. I picked this spiral section of the texture because it really fits the Beetlejuice theme. Now carefully transfer the cutouts to a sheet of deli paper to keep them safe during the next steps. To prepare for the bats, run the scraps back through the pasta machine and retexture. You might have noticed that I didn't press my textured clay down onto the ceramic tile firmly enough, so some of my cutouts kept lifting. If that happens, just press the clay back onto the tile a bit, and that should help it release from the cutter. Now let's go ahead and repeat the cutting process on our striped cane that we rolled through the pasta machine earlier on a setting number 4. Cut 2 2-inch pieces of 20 gauge craft wire from the roll. With the striped cutouts facing down on your work surface, gently press the wires into the striped clay, taking care not to distort the shape. Next, take the wasabi cutouts and place them on top of the striped clay. Gently press the 2 pieces together. Once you're happy with how they're aligned, carefully lift the clay pieces off your work surface and really press those seams together. Just be careful not to distort the texture. And don't worry if the edges overlap a bit. We'll clean that up later with some sanding. A knitting needle can really help smooth out those seams in those hard-to-reach areas. Now let's grab our metallic pigment powder. Using your fingertip, gently wipe it over the high spots of the texture. This really makes the texture pop and adds that extra special touch the clay needs. To release the wires from the bead, use pliers to hold the wire steady and twist the bead. After that, gently pull the wire out. Next, we're going to sand the seams. I'm starting off with some 220 grit sandpaper and a bit of soapy water. Just dip both the bead and the sandpaper in the water, then place the sandpaper on your work surface. Gently sand the edges of the bead. You don't need to press hard on the sandpaper to get a nice, clean, flat surface. After you've finished with the 220 grit sandpaper, work your way up through the finer grits until you reach 1000 grit. This will help give your bead a super smooth finish. Now I'm going to apply a polyurethane varnish over the pigment powder to seal and protect it. This step is super important for keeping that beautiful finish looking great. I decided to apply resin to the stripe side of the bead, so if you'd like to do that as well, go for it. Next, let's start on the 3-part Skinner blend we'll use for the framing bead. Since I'm a visual person, I find that making a set of stencils really helps me with this process. I've included the stencil cutout in the detailed blog post linked below if you want to create your own. Now that we have our pieces cut out, we're going to arrange the triangles side by side, with the wide ends touching to form a rectangle. This setup will create the smooth color transition for your blend. Take your sheet of clay and fold it in half, making sure those 2 edges of the same color are lined up nicely. When you're ready to run it through the machine, remember to always insert the folded side down first. We'll repeat this process about 15 to 20 times, making sure to fold the same way each time. I've run this through the pasta machine several times, but I wanted to bring you back to show you something important. You can use your hands to gently adjust the clay during the blending process. This little trick helps you maintain a consistent width and keeps that blend just the right size for your earrings. And here's our finished blend. It really reminds me of a sunset melting into the night sky. If you want to add some texture to the surface, a fun trick is to run the clay through the pasta machine with an air conditioning sponge filter. It gives a really unique effect. Once you've rolled it out, go ahead and slice the sheet in half to create two pieces that are about equal in size. Now let's grab our striped cane and slice off two pieces that are about 3.5 millimeters thick. Once you've got those slices, roll them through the pasta machine on a number 2 setting. After we clean up the edges of our Skinner blend, we're going to cut out two 1-inch segments from it. Next, let's combine each Skinner blend strip with a striped cane slice to create a segment that measures about 3 inches square. To stick them together, place a sheet of deli paper over the surface and gently smooth the seams with your fingers to make sure they bond seamlessly. Once you're done with the first one, just repeat the process for the second earring. And here are the two front faces of our frame bead, perfectly mirrored. Now let's grab our black clay. My strips are a little too long, so I'm going to shorten them up a bit. Let's take the front of our frame bead and align the stripe side with the corner of the black clay. Once aligned, roll gently with an acrylic rod to set in place. Let's do that one more time for the second earring. Don't forget to trim off any excess clay that doesn't align with the black clay backer. Next, grab your 1 3/4 inch tombstone clay cutter and gently press it into the surface of the clay to mark the shape. But don't cut all the way through just yet. Make sure the seam runs diagonally across the tombstone shape. Once you've done that, repeat the process on the second piece, flipping the diagonal to create a mirrored set. I used a piece of copy paper to lay out several reference lines that will help me align the coffin cutter in our frame bead. Take your time with the alignment, and when it looks just right, go ahead and make the cut. Repeat the same process for the second frame bead. You'll notice that since we're cutting on paper, the clay might lift a bit from the surface, but that's totally okay. Just use your finger to gently release the coffin shape from the cutter. Now let's take the tombstone cutter and align it with the marks we made earlier. Once it's lined up just right, go ahead and make the cut. Now we get to the fun part, using tools. First, place your frame bead in the vise, making sure it's perpendicular to the work surface using a square. To keep the bead steady, I like to use wide popsicle sticks for extra support. You can then visually locate the bead's center using a ruler to get it just right. Then mount a number 60 drill bit in the Dremel and carefully drill through the bead, making sure to clear away any polymer clay chips as you go. If you don't have this set up, no worries. You can use a pin vise to drill the hole, it just takes a bit more time. And here's our first drilled hole for our frame bead. Now we're going to flip the bead over and repeat the process on the other end. Here it is! I'm getting so excited to assemble these. To begin, let's make a simple loop headpin. Start by snipping the end of a 2-inch wire segment to make it flush. Then grip the end with your round nose pliers and roll the wire around the pliers to form a loop. Once the loop is complete, adjust the pliers so that one jaw is on the opposite side of where the loop meets the wire. Gently bend the long end of the wire with your finger until the loop is centered. Now take your bat bead and slide it onto the simple loop headpin. Make any final adjustments to ensure everything looks just the way you want it. Next, use your pliers to make a slight kink at the base of the bat bead. Trim the wire to just under 1/2 inch with your snippers. Then grip the end of the wire with your round nose pliers and roll it over to form a loop. Now let's create the spiral headpin. Start by cutting a piece of 22 gauge wire about 4.5 inches long. Using your round nose pliers, grasp one end of the wire and begin bending it around the tip of the pliers to make a loop. Keep wrapping the wire around the pliers to form a spiral shape. You can adjust the spiral to be as tight or as loose as you like. I found it easier to secure the spiral with flat nose pliers and use my thumb to bend the wire around the spiral. Once you've made about 3 spirals, take your flat nose pliers and pressing against the base of the spiral, bend the longer end of the wire straight. Then reposition your flat nose pliers around the spiral and roll it up to meet the bend. I'm so excited! Let's grab our frame bead and start assembling. This part can be a little tricky with aligning and positioning the beads, but trust me, it's totally worth it to make these fun earrings. Start by partially inserting the spiral headpin into the frame bead, then add an 11-nose seed bead, followed by an O bead and our coffin bead. I found that passing the wire towards the back makes it much easier to position the final O bead and 3mm crystal. Just be extra careful when bringing the wire back down into the frame bead. I had to do this a few times to get it just right. Isn't this fun already? I love the twirling movement. Let's make a wrap loop by using our round nose pliers to create a small bend at the base of the wire. Then reposition the pliers so that one jaw is under the bend, and wrap the wire around the top jaw to form a loop. Next, switch to your flat nose pliers to hold the loop steady. Using a second pair of pliers, carefully wrap the tail of the wire around the base, keeping the wraps close together and neat. Once you're happy with the wraps, snip off any excess wire with cutters and use your pliers to tuck in any sharp edges. Now let's grab your bat bead and open the simple loop at the base of it. Slide your frame bead into the loop, then carefully close the loop to secure everything in place. Next, take your earring wire and open the loop. Insert the simple loop at the top of the bat onto the ear wire, then close the loop to secure it. And there you have it, a fun, spooky pair of Beetlejuice earrings. I hope that you're feeling inspired to try these techniques in your own projects. I'd love to see what you create, so be sure to share and tag me on social media. If you've enjoyed today's tutorial, please subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. I upload every other Friday, so until next time, follow your passion and keep making.